So this question immediately thrown to you, and this question comes from James on YouTube. After looking like a potential title contender just a month ago, how have Atalanta got themselves into a position where they may not even qualify for the Champions League anymore?
Well, in blunt terms, 3 games, no goals. That's going to do it for you.
Yeah, of course it is.
But they have played good opposition in those 3 games. And I think the first of those 3 games is the important one, because the first of them was against Inter, and Inter have got their number. And Inter always have Atalanta's number. So whatever strides Atalanta are able to make, I think if they'd have played the games that they've played against Atalanta, Fiorentina and Lazio in a different order, I think they would have gone quite differently. But the fact that they had Inter first, I think knocked the stuffing out of them a little bit. And all of a sudden, they'd crept up without anyone realising they were making a title challenge. And then Inter knock the wind out of their sails. Now, I think that makes an absolutely massive difference. Look, there are a number of other reasons why Atalanta have fallen short. I think they've been overachieving when you consider the amount of turnover there was last summer. When you look at their injury list, which is still absolutely huge, by the way.
Yeah, it's 3 games without a goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's not great, is it? I think they've had to, like, Retegui was injured around the international break, and they've not really been able to give him time out as well, which I think has been an issue. And then, of course, we all know about the Ademola Lookman thing with Gianpiero Gasperini. That's calmed down a bit, but it does feel as if they're not at their calmest and they're in a bit of a fluster at the moment, because, of course, there was that thing at the weekend when they lost at home to Lazio where they brought off Ademola Lookman by mistake. So Gasperini says to the team manager, who informs the 4th official of the substitutions, as it happens with most teams, he said, take off Ede, meaning Edison. And the manager heard it Ade.
Ade, yes. Look.
And so he subbed him. And by the time Gasperini had realised the mistake, it was too late. And Lookman was already off the pitch. So as Gasperini put it, we're 1-0 down against Lazio, who are a really good team. Chasing the game with 15 minutes left, we're just taking our best attacker off by accident.
It's incredible that can happen.
I come from a family of Ades, so I know it can happen.
Well, they're not even a family of Ades, are they? Oh. But I mean, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't happen. It's the sort of thing that doesn't happen when things are going well, or maybe when things are going well, it just becomes a little footnote. But I think, in terms of them battling, as James was saying, for a Champions League place, it's about the teams who are coming up behind as well. And it's about the teams they've lost to. So forget the Inter game for a minute. The fact that they've lost to Fiorentina and Lazio, 2 direct concurrents for those positions, is a huge problem. You've got Roma and Juventus there as well. Bologna are in great nick at the moment. And actually, if we go forward to this weekend, Atalanta have to go to Bologna. That is a point at which they have to recover their form. Bologna, of course, drew with Napoli on Monday, gave them a really good game. They're in terrific form at the moment, and they're in the top 4. So Atalanta need to go to Bologna and at least not lose.
They need to remember there's still something to play for this season, because since that defeat, what you've said, and they saw the title dreams kind of go, like tools have essentially been downed. But they need to remember there is still a lot to play for, and other teams, like Andy said, behind them are coming up very fast.
This question from Ivan on Instagram: why did Bayern Munich decide not to extend Thomas Müller's contract, and where does he go to next? It's a big question for them, isn't it? And
one that can be answered in 4 words: money, 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 money.
Oh, okay.
Because it's been a really expensive last couple of months for Bayern. They've extended the contract, notably, of Jamal Musiala, which has cost them an arm and a leg. And on top of that, Alphonso Davies, Joshua Kimmich. Not everyone can get paid. And Bayern have always been aware of that. You know, ever since the bit where Toni Kroos got squeezed out because they couldn't re-up everyone, and that sort of paved the way for him going to Real Madrid and, you know, becoming one of the most gilded midfielders in European football. Obviously, the situation's a little bit different with Müller, but Müller gets 20 million a year. And for a player who's like one of the greats, but his influence has waned.
Yeah.
They can't be paying that this year. We were talking in the main show about how they can't really afford to to get Florian Wirtz. If they re-up Müller, maybe they can't afford to get Wirtz next year either. And, it definitely puts him off the table. If they were to shift a few other pieces, maybe they could actually clear the space for Wirtz. I think it would be complicated. It would be difficult because you're talking about another 20 million a year
do
guy.
Footballers never take a pay cut and think, look, I know you can't afford me, I'll take 10 million, not 20 million?
I think there's a degree of them wanting to move on as well and go in a different direction. If you look at that, brilliant.
Is that the footballer or the club?
I think the club. Well, I mean, of course, Müller would want to stay. Probably ideally like to see his career out. But
he said that, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So there is that. But I think Bayern have got to look beyond that. And if you look at that generation and that team, this him and Neuer are the only ones who remain around. Robben, Ribéry gone, Lahm gone. All these from that key team.
I mean, they will want to keep him in the tent. So whether that means him going immediately upstairs, so going back to Ivan's question on where does he go next, I think, whether that means to, club level or whether that means to another football club, I think are two different questions, because he will end up in a position of influence at Bayern at some point. There's no doubt about that. That's what they like to do. He's someone who's highly thought of, massively intelligent, speaks great English. All those things are super important, whether it's an ambassadorial role or a technical role at the club. But the real question is, does he carry on playing next season? And does he have the appetite to carry on playing next season? My guess would be, it's too late for him to come to the Premier League.
Yeah.
I think MLS.
I think it's MLS. I don't see him going anywhere else. MLS. If a move there doesn't materialise, I think he might just say, all right, I might just actually pack it in. But I could see him having a few years. And there's probably a lot of clubs that could benefit from that intelligence.
He'd still be outstanding there, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
That's a proper pay cut, though, isn't it? It's money.
No, there are ways and means.
Okay.
But he'd do okay.
Okay, yeah, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
If I was Thomas Müller, I would take your word for it. Are you sure? Yes.
Take my word for it in writing.
I am now assured, yes. Fred on X asked, with Athletic Bilbao sitting fourth in La Liga, David, do you think they've reached their ceiling with this Basque-only players policy?
It's a question that emerges every year and after every success or even every failure at Athletic. And it's good to give some context to comments made from a very famous figure at the club in Javier Clemente. He actually said, he went one further, and he said, with the current squad at Athletic Bilbao and the talent that they have at their disposal, he feels it's the best squad that they've ever had. Best generation of talent, young talent, that perhaps they should have made a better go at La Liga this year, especially given the frailties of Barcelona and Real Madrid being there.
It's not a 90-point league, is it?
No. And Atleti as well. And he kind of pushed it and said, look, you've got the best coach that Athletic's ever had in Ernesto Valverde. Absolutely. One of the brightest young players, two of the brightest young players in the world, I think in Nico Williams and Oyhan Sangset. And they've got a really good squad there, not just the good 11 that they have had previously. And they perhaps should have, been a bit further up there if we're being ambitious. I don't think they are going to hit a ceiling because I think they're always going to keep producing better talent. I think the talent that Lezama, the youth academy, is producing is better than it ever has. So who's to say in the next 1, 2, 3 years they continue to produce 3, 4 more brilliant talents on the level of Nico Williams? Then that only increases their ceiling. Oh, we can do better now. We've got better players now. So I don't think there is a ceiling there for them. I think they can continue to progress. And what
about for their fans? I'm sorry to cut you because it always intrigues me. What do the fans think of this? Why is it important for them that the tradition, the legacy of Basque only is maintained?
It's the whole identity of the club, isn't it? I mean, it's their unique selling point, if you want to put it in a horrible modern commercial term. But in terms of the traditions of your club being respected, it's something that we all feel really passionately, whoever our club is, and it's something that's very particular to them. You look at them and they've got an incredible historical record, given that has always been their policy. Mm-hmm. So in terms of it reaching a ceiling, I mean, what are we talking about now? Are we talking about in the context of modern football? Are we talking about in comparison to Real Madrid and Barcelona now? And also, what if beating Real Madrid and Barcelona and Atletico, I suppose, to the Liga this season isn't the aim, isn't the most important thing to you? I think it's very easy for us to look at things in modern football and think, if we're not winning stuff, what are we doing?
Yeah.
But realistically, that is not the aim of every football club. That is not the top aim of every football club. To represent yourself and your traditions is the most important thing of any football club. Now, of course, for some football clubs, for a very, very small amount of elite football clubs, winning trophies, they feel, is part of that tradition. Although even if you're Barcelona, you feel is winning trophies and playing in a particular way, don't you, for example? And this is so intrinsic, is such a huge part of them. But going back to what David's saying about the generation at the moment and what Javier Clemente's saying about the generation at the moment, I think the remarkable thing about them this season, they are so good that they're not actually leaning that hard on Nico Williams. So it did great to keep him last summer, and he'll go when he's ready to go. And now it'll probably be the Premier League rather than Barcelona, and I think that's probably a better thing for Athletic. But the fact is, you expect him to come back after the Euros and like him to have this season where he just carries the team. But actually, they don't need carrying, which I think is really important.
They're too unified. They're too much of a collective to allow one player to emerge and to be a superstar.
But it's not just the collective identity. It's just that they've got a shitload of good players.
Yeah, and
that's the major part of it. And obviously, we're speaking. You'll be listening to this after the first leg against Rangers in the quarterfinal of the Europa League. So we'll see how that goes. But not just because they're playing at San Mamés. They are for me, the clear favourites for that competition.
Yeah, the way that we moved past Roma was really impressive, and they did it, for me, without a player who is better than Nico Williams and who is the best player at the club, and that is Sunset, who I think is just an absolutely phenomenal footballer.
I think the other thing about Athletic that we've got to bear in mind is they're in a position now, and we talk about how the football world's changed, but I think they've actually slightly changed with it. Now, of course, if we go back like 35 years, the reason that Real Sociedad start taking non-Spanish, non-Basque players.
Start with John Aldridge, start with Irish.
Then you get
British players.
And off the back of Aldridge, you get Richardson and Kevin Richardson and Dalian Atkinson, the late great Dalian Atkinson, and all of those. They say is because, hang on, Athletic aren't nicking all the best talent.
Yep.
We haven't got a chance out there. They are taking all the best.
That's how it's
talent.
always been seen. Yeah.
Exactly, and they have kind of bent the rules to get players in the past that fit into their Basque only policy. But I think we're a step further on from that now. So when you look at, say, I don't know, like the return of Ander Herrera, for example, I think if we go back 15 or 20 years, that wouldn't have happened. When they're gone forever. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. I think great Basque players who've moved on will happily come back there now. So say for example, if Nico Williams went and joined a Premier League club, let's say for argument's sake, he went and joined Chelsea this summer. It would not stun me if he completes a 4 or 5 year contract at Chelsea. Again, bear with me. And then at the end of it says, right, okay, I'm going back to Athletic.
Yeah,
that wouldn't have happened in previous generations, but I think that could happen now.
And they can still pay it really, really well. That's another thing to remember as well.
Well, look at the wages that Nico Williams is on at the moment.
And that's why he is still there. But look, bottom line is, to answer this question, I think if you would ask 50,000 Athletic Bilbao fans, would you give up the Basque policy to win a La Liga title? I guarantee about 98% of them would say absolutely not.
Teddy on Instagram, though, asks a very different question. After another fairly underwhelming Premier League season with Chelsea, bear with me now, Andy. Can we expect Christopher Nkunku to head back to the continent this summer? And if so, which club would benefit most from his skill set? It's a fair question, isn't it?
It is a fair question. I can imagine yes. I mean, he's got ambitions to be in the French team. That's not going to happen.
Ahead of the World Cup, obviously.
Yeah. Not just the squad, but the team. But at the moment, you're right, he's got no chance of getting in the squad with the amount of minutes he's getting. So things have to change this summer for reasons not entirely within his control. It's not been a success at Chelsea at all. But I think you look at the qualities he has, the fact that he can play any one of the forward positions. I think there are a lot of clubs that could do with him. I do wonder, because it's not really worked for him in the Premier League, if he's more likely to go back to the Bundesliga.
Yeah, I was thinking Bundesliga, and I still think he can command a top team as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we talked about players going back. I wouldn't totally rule out him going back to Leipzig, but I would say Bayern, Dortmund, more of a possibility. Leverkusen probably not, because they look like they might sign Jonathan Burkhardt, the Germany striker from Mainz next season. But yeah, I mean, if you're an Eintracht Frankfurt, you're having a go. I don't think you get him, but you definitely have a go, I think. The problem is, it's been such a miserable time for him at Chelsea. People have almost forgotten how good he is. Now, bear in mind, at the point where it was almost impossible for PSG youth products and certainly forward players to get into their team, he got games and looked totally ready for it. He never looked even slightly out of his depth. So what he turned into in Germany when he was at RB Leipzig is not really a surprise, because he had that quality, he had that mentality where he felt like he belonged amongst top players. And I thought he would be an absolute game changer for Chelsea. Now, after he missed most of that first season, that pretty much finished that. The ability's there. He needs to be somewhere he can play. Like, if you'd have gone back, say, like 6 to 8 months, I wouldn't have ruled out him going back to PSG. Now, they've always kept the conversation going. It was never a full stop once he left. They always kept an eye on him, like we might get him back at some point in the future. But now, with the forward resources they've got and with the level, is he going to play enough to get back to his best? And I think the answer is probably no. I think he needs to go somewhere where he's going to play, right?
Yeah, I think Ramos would probably have to leave PSG. And then even then, he's still going to be the backup to the main act. So he needs to go somewhere where you can get 40 games. But I think he's a really talented player. But if you look at the timing of his injuries that he's had with Chelsea as well, they've been there's no good time for an injury, but with Nkunku, they've been at terrible times in terms of missing pre-season, in terms of missing a lot of key, games where he might get a run as well. It has been really unfortunate for him.
This one more question from Ed on Instagram now. After his sad passing this week, what legacy does the talent scout Aurelio da Silva Pereira leave behind in Portuguese football? Somebody that I've not heard of, but are you familiar with him, man?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the best, if not the best talent scout in the history of Portuguese football. And you can tell how important he is by the way that the biggest names in Portuguese football have reacted to his passing. So we've had messages from and old photos of him with Cristiano Ronaldo, Ricardo Quaresma, Rafael Leao. Now you will notice the connection there is Sporting Club de Portugal. And so Aurelio da Silva Pereira was a player for Sporting, and then he went on to be a recruiter, worked for the club for over 40 years. And it's not just about him going out there and identifying good players who turned into great players. It's about building the whole image of Sporting and building their personality. Now, we talked before about Athletic and how what a football club is not just about what you're able to produce on the field. Your identity is about something more than that. It's about your values, your core beliefs, how you build your team, how you build your squads. And Sporting have never been the biggest club in Lisbon and never will be. They'll never be one of the top two biggest clubs in Portugal either, because that's Benfica and Porto. But while Benfica, and everyone always gives you this thing about 7 out of 10 Portuguese support Benfica, and a huge part of that is the 61 and 62 European Cup wins, of course. the fact is Sporting had to be something else. And what Sporting was a prolific producer of players. And you can go through them all, can't you? Paulo Futre, Simão, we talked about Cristiano Ronaldo, Figo, Nani, Quaresma, up to Rafael Leao, and you look at Giovanni and all of those today. Him spotting those players and them becoming something special has not only marked him out as someone who is an incredible talent scout, it has built the reputation of Sporting as a conveyor belt for pretty much all the best players in Portuguese football history, or most of them. So for Sporting to be what they are, a huge part of that is Aurélio de Silva Pereira. And really, there's not a better sum up for a life, for a career in football than that, is there? Not someone who just spotted some players, but someone who helped shape the image of one of the most important clubs in Portugal, and a really prominent club in European football terms, and a hugely prominent club in terms of bringing in some of the best talent into European football that we've seen in the last 30, 40 years.
Amazing tribute for somebody who was clearly quite special, Aurélio da Silva Pereira. It's now time for our Game of the Week, brought to you by FotMob. Each week, our experts recommend a game for you to watch at the weekend. And just as importantly, don't forget, they also suggest the food that we should be having with it. So, Andy, what are you going for this week? Food-wise comes in a moment, but football-wise, let's start with that.
We are going for Lazio versus Roma, the Derby della Capitale, Sunday night at 7:45 UK time. Now, we were talking about the logjam at the top of Serie A. Lazio and Roma well in the mix. So Roma only in 7th position as stands, but only 4 points off the Champions League places. And of course, if you look at the numbers, they have been in unbelievable form this calendar year. Of course, Ranieri's done an incredible job, and they've made it difficult for Lazio in derbies over the last little while. So it'll be really interesting. For Lazio, they've got a chance to cut away the sort of, I suppose they'll see it as like the Michael Myers of Serie A, who just will not go away this season, because they have thought for months they're going to finish above Roma, and then all of a sudden Roma have started to really come back under Ranieri. So great derby, great occasion. I think it'll be a great match as well. In terms of food, look, there's not going to be time for a big old meal, I think, with this. But what we know, and what we have always covered on OTC, is that suppli are better than arancini. And so, therefore, we'll be enjoying some suppli.
I just disagree. I just disagree with that. It's absolutely shocking.
Yeah, I know. I read on FotMob, though, that Roma won their last 2 Derby della Capitales. How important is that in this picture?
Massive, because Lazio now haven't beaten Rome for over 2 years. And in the Mourinho period, of course, Mourinho did lots of positive things, believe it or not, at Roma, including filling the stadium, winning a European trophy, all of that sort of stuff. But if there was a little doubt from the supporters, it was that he didn't quite get the derby and he didn't put enough into it. Whereas, like Ranieri, that's never a question, because he's Roman, he's Romanista. There's no question with him that he's all in on this. And of course, he used to coach the Lazio coach. That's how old he is.
David, what's your pick for the weekend?
I'm going to go for the Klassiker on Saturday at 5:30 p.m. Bayern versus Borussia Dortmund. Some might say, well, this is a bit of a non-contest given Dortmund's situation. Bayern obviously at the top, but I don't know. Imagine Dortmund. The great thing here is if Dortmund were to win, kind of capitalise on Bayern's defeat in midweek to Inter, and then Bayer Leverkusen have a very winnable game against Union Berlin, the gap at the top would be just 3 points.
And they're right up in the Champions League mix again if they win this, aren't they, Dortmund?
Yeah, and it's just that added incentive. So this isn't a complete non-contest, but it's a big reach. And FootMob, they tell me that Dortmund haven't kept a clean sheet in their last 7 games as well. So Bayern are inevitably going to score. It's a question whether Dortmund can fire on all cylinders as well.
Yeah, and what are we going to eat with it?
Well, obviously it's a German game, and everyone who's a regular listener to this, no, Andy's already laughing, knows that I'm not a fan of German cuisine. Yeah. So Turkish cuisine has got a huge impact on German life. So
I see what you've done there.
Yeah.
A kebab. I've waited for a kebab for years.
Yeah,
I could murder one right now.
So yes, I'm going to go for one of my, actually probably is my favourite Turkish dish, which is a lamb iskender.
Oh, I like them. Yeah, no, I'm going for that. Yeah,
can't be beaten.
I'm with you.
Can't be beaten.
No, you're absolutely right. Sorry, Andy, but it cannot actually be beaten. You've got a good point.
Yeah, with these supply.
Just like Bayern versus Dortmund, can't be beaten.
Well, you'll be full up from the lamb iskender, so you won't want to eat too much when you get to the Rome derby, will you?
And that's 5:30.
That's why I've gone for snack food. See, perfect synergy.
So that's 5:30 on Saturday. Bayern versus Dortmund, and Andy's pick Lazio versus Roma Sunday at 7:45 p.m. And you can follow those matches and many more from across Europe and beyond with FootMob. FootMob is the best place to check the latest scores and in-depth stats from the football on the continent. Download the free FootMob app right now and get all the latest analysis at your fingertips in time for the weekend. And thank you for listening to Ask OTC. If you'd like to ask a question, you can contact us at any time at Radio Dotun, at Andy Brassel, at David Jacka, or at OTC Pod. And you can email us otc@footballramble.com.